Hey, this is attorney Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein. Today we're going to be talking about making the decision of whether you should have your one owner business be a sole proprietorship or an LLC. So before we get into this, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what is sole proprietorship and what is an LLC. So if you start a business and you don't form some special thing, you don't form an LLC, corporation, and that kind of stuff, and it's just one owner, you are automatically a sole proprietor. That's just the default of how your business is regarded. And because of that, it is regarded as the same as you. You are personally liable for everything, the finances, getting sued, all that kind of stuff. But it also means that it's relatively simple. You don't have to file something to set it up. You may have to get a business license and do the things, but you don't have to file anything to form the sole proprietorship. It is automatic for one owner business. And the money stuff is just going to go on your personal tax return, which can be really simple for people. We're going to go into what the pluses and minuses of it in more detail, but that's the idea. An LLC is a limited liability company. This is something you have to file paperwork with a state to form. Usually you're going to form it in your own state where you reside, but sometimes it makes sense to form it somewhere else. That's a bit beyond the scope of this particular video. Right now, we're just looking at LLCs versus sole proprietorships. Now, the big thing about a limited liability company is the limited liability. It means that the company is separate from you. So the company is liable for its own contracts, for getting sued, for its debts. It's the one that owns the assets. It is separate from you. If you actually run it correctly. I say that because sometimes people mess it up. They don't do all the things they're supposed to, and then they lose that liability. But that's the kind of the idea. So you might think, well, why doesn't everyone just form an LLC? Because it limits liability, right? Well, here's the thing. There's pluses and minuses to both having a sole proprietorship and an LLC. It's not the right decision for everybody to form an LLC straight from the beginning. So let's kind of break it down. So the first thing is your budget. Let's say you're starting a small business and you have no money at all. Forming an LLC, even if you do it yourself, is going to cost money. It's going to cost money to just file stuff with the state. And that's if you do it 100% yourself and just go on the state's website to file it. If you hire a company to do it, like you hire Northwest is one of the companies I recommend to form LLCs, or if you hire a lawyer to do it, whole lot more money, obviously, right? So sometimes it makes sense just to start out with a sole proprietorship if you have no money and you're starting out a business that this is the kind of thing where you're not going to make a huge amount of money in the beginning because maybe it's a hobby business, You're thinking, oh, this first year I'm just going to sell a few things on Etsy. I mean, maybe I'll make $2,000. It doesn't make sense to spend $2,000 if all you're going to make this year is $2,000, right? Especially if you're a one-person business, you don't have outside investors or any of that kind of stuff. So in that case, it can make sense to start out as a sole proprietorship. The next thing you want to look at is really just your tolerance for risk, complexity, paperwork. This is something that really depends on you as a person. So I have some clients who come in and they're so stressed by the risk of starting a business that we need to form an LLC for them because they're not going to be able to function and do this business if they are worried that, they're going to get sued and someone's going to come take their house, right? So it's important to acknowledge the fact that different people have a different tolerance for that kind of risk. Some people, though, they don't have a tolerance for complexity. Filling a whole bunch of paperwork, having all these different complicated tax things and bookkeeping and all this stuff, they can't deal with it right now until they can pay someone else to do it, and they can't afford to pay someone else to do it. So it's better to just start simple and just be a sole proprietorship. And the same kind of thing with the paperwork. Even an LLC has some paperwork you have to do every year. Not as much as a corporation, but it still has some. And some people, you have to be real. Are you going to do this? Or do you need to wait until you can pay someone else to do it? The next thing to look at is who are your clients or customers? So what I mean is, if you're selling stuff on Etsy, the people who buy it, they don't care if you're LLC or sole proprietorship. They might not even know what an LLC is, right? Versus, let's say you have clients or customers who are other businesses, who are big corporations. They don't want to do business with sole proprietorship. You look sketchy. And also, they don't want to have you be an accidental employee like under California law or somewhere. They want to do business with an LLC or corporation. So you have to look at who are your clients, who are your customers. If they're individual people versus are they businesses or is it the government? And if it's a businesses or the government, you may want to form an LLC. You also have to look at your personal assets. You may be someone who has no personal assets. So they sue you. What's going to happen? Okay, whatever. I mean, don't be wrong. Obviously, you don't want a judgment against you. You don't have to declare bankruptcy, but they're not coming to take your house because you don't own a house. So, that's different than someone who has a lot of money saved. They have investments. They have other businesses. It really just depends on, do you have something that needs protecting or not really. Also, if you have employees or other staff. So here's the thing. If you have employees, you need to form an LLC because employees add a significant amount of risk to your business. First, the employee themselves may come after you for something that happened. And then also they may do something that you didn't want them to do that is not good. And then your business gets sued. Because the thing is, if it's just you have no employees or staff of any kind, hopefully you can control yourself and not do bad things that makes your business get sued. But your employees, who knows what they'll do, right? And so I think it makes a lot of sense to protect yourself that way. Another thing to look at is the type of business or industry that you're in. Some businesses are pretty chill. Some businesses are a little bit more on the sketchy side. They're much more litigious. The people that you deal with may just be more likely to get involved in lawsuits. Same kind of thing with the kind of business you have as far as, do you have a lot of inventory? Did you have to take out loans? Are you signing a lease on something? Now, if you're starting a brand new business, even if you form an LLC, you may have to co-sign all that stuff anyway, at least up to a certain amount of money. I think the last time I looked at small business administration loans, you had to co-sign up to 25 grand, but I could be wrong. That's been a few years ago. It might be more now. So it is important to realize that. Like my American Express card, I personally had to co-sign for it for my LLC that owns all my YouTube channels and things. So, that is what it is. That's just the aspect of doing business as a small business. But sometimes you don't have to. So when I signed the lease for this space, it was my LLC that signed it, not me personally. And that's exactly what you want. You want the LLC to be on the record as being liable for things and not you, if that's possible. So it all depends. Do you have any of that kind of stuff that you're doing or not? Are you going to have to, buy a whole bunch of inventory? Or not really. So some businesses are very, very low on their assets and debts, and some businesses are much, much higher. And the more assets and debts you have, the more likely you want to have an LLC. Another thing is, how long is it going to take you to grow? What kind of profits are you going to make in the short and long term? So if you're starting a brand new business and this is a side gig, it's something that you're working on nights, weekends, and you don't even know if it's going to work. You're not having to put a huge amount of money in it because it's something that you do on the hot side. And it's not technically a hobby business because you're running it to try to make a profit, but you don't know, right? Maybe you're going to make $2,000 this year, like I said. Maybe you're going to make $10,000 this year. It makes sense to just keep everything simple, have the minimal amount of setup that you could possibly do to be legal. Versus if you're doing this full time, like I have a client one time who was doing software work and then left that company, I think actually got laid off, and then took that money that they got from their severance to start their consulting business. And it was realistic to think that they might make 6 figures that first year. And so if you're doing something like that, I lean towards more forming an LLC, especially in their case, because it was business to business work and they need an LLC to make their customers happy. Also, it depends on the state that you're located in. So here in California, where I am located, you form an LLC, you got $800 a year franchise fee, even if you make $0. Versus if you form in another state, it's, you have to pay $40 or $100 or whatever to form the LLC. Maybe you have some annual fee that's in that same price range, and that's it. So, if you're talking about $40 versus $800 makes a big difference when you look at how much money you have to make for the LLC to make sense. So those are the considerations you want to think about, whether it makes sense for sole proprietorship or LLC, as far as kind of all the legal stuff. Now, the last thing to look at is taxes. And this does go towards how much money you think you're going to make in that first year. So if you have a sole proprietorship, it's taxed. A sole proprietorship, the taxes go on your tax return. With an LLC, you have more options. You can have an LLC that's taxed the same way. Sole proprietorship goes in your tax return, very simple. Or you can have an LLC that is taxed as a corporation, specifically an S corporation is what a lot of people do. And this is actually something that I'm doing with my YouTube businesses at the end of this year. So starting next year, I'm switching it to be an LLC tax as a sole proprietorship to be an LLC tax as an S corp. I don't have to form an S corp. It's this nice little hack, right? I just have the same business entity and I don't have to change anything. I don't have to change my bank accounts, none of that stuff, same EIN. And then I can have the LLC be taxed as an S corp, which has all kinds of tax advantages that are beyond the scope of this video, but it means that I will pay less in self-employment taxes, the short version of that. So it should make a big difference on my bottom line in the tune of thousands of dollars. Now, if you're only making $2,000 or $10,000 a year in your gross revenue or even in your profits, it doesn't make sense to worry about S corp. You're not going to save any money. But if you're making $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, yes. And so there's somewhere in between 50 and 100 where it makes sense to do. It depends on all your other financial things and what state you're in and all this kind of stuff. But that's what I mean is, so for some people, they want to set up the LLC, have it be taxed as sole proprietorship, and then in some future year, flip it over to being taxed as an S corp and get the advantages of tax status. Other people, who knows if this business is even going to work, they're just going to keep it really simple, a sole proprietorship. They can form an LLC or S Corp whenever it makes sense and they can pay someone else to do it. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I'll try to point you in the right direction. Thumbs up if you found this video helpful. Subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.